What is courage? Courage is when we take action in the face of fear. The fear is often there, at least it appears to, protect us. Sometimes it actually does. It's why we know better, why we feel a sense of trepidation when we're at a high elevation. It's why we choose automatically, neurologically, not to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge or a tall building. It's why there is a near universal fear of heights. It's there to protect the physical being. So a 1-year-old that doesn't know better might approach a crocodile on the riverbank. It's so curious it wants to know more about him, despite the fact that this is often going to lead to a fairly negative physical effect. In this case, the child truly doesn't know better. Of course, if you are able to approach that same crocodile, despite the fact that you have fear, that is a combination of courage. Some would say stupidity.
And you can see it react right there. You've got to watch yourself. It's not too quickly to move. It's opening its eyes right now. That's another warning sign. You're not going to spend too much longer here, right?
But there are other things in life that when people look at it from their paradigm as something that they could never do, that when you go out there and you do it effortlessly, then they assume that you are a courageous person, when in fact, courage had no part in it. Just to give you an example, from my own life, for most men, approaching a woman that you are attracted to, that you've never met in public, is cause for great trepidation. Most men, no matter how successful or attractive they might be, will still refuse to do this without some social greasing of the interaction, like being introduced to somebody by a mutual friend. In this case, it's the sense of self, the ego, that fears rejection, that you're not good enough, attractive enough, successful enough, whatever it might be, that inner fear. As the pursuers of the females, we are putting ourselves at risk that the woman is going to tell us that our genes are nowhere good enough to propagate to the next generation, that she'll be looking elsewhere. But hey, you know what? We can be friends. Who hasn't had that statement uttered to them? Ugh. The one difference between me and the rest of my buddies is the fact that I would always attempt to climb the wall of fear and get to the other side. It doesn't mean that my foray on the other side was successful. Most of the time it wasn't, but I still, despite the trepidation, despite the fear, still climbed and proceeded. You see, the beautiful thing in life is that as we grow, as we mature, we have the possibility also to grow on a spiritual level in terms of the fact that the ego lessens. It becomes largely dissolved. And this is what's taken place for me through various spiritual experiences, various trips that I've had, realizing what a microcosm I am of the universe. And this has really freed me up to the point where what used to be a wall of inhibition, what used to be a wall that would not prevent me from taking action, but would warn me that danger was present, it suddenly became, it was just obliterated. The stone wall in front of me disintegrated in front of me. And if I felt fear approaching somebody, it was a very tiny pebble that I could just smack away. And so what other people consider to be courageous, in fact, there is no fear present, so it's not courage at all. It's just something to be done, a task to be done with a goal in mind. And the goal in mind, of course, is to make somebody feel really good. And if something else comes of it, great. There was a time that I was sitting at an Indian restaurant with two buddies of mine, and there were two in Los Angeles, and there were two very attractive women. And they were eating. We both all commented quietly on how pretty they were, and they got up to leave. And I said, guys, excuse me, I'm going to go and talk to these ladies, and I'm going to try to get a date. And they said, no, you're not, dude. No, you're not. And these are both successful, good-looking guys that I was with, but they were too scared to make that approach. And so I went outside. I introduced myself. I just said, I want you guys to know, I think you both are very attractive women. You know, I'd love to get to know you guys, et cetera, et cetera. But the energy behind it was not scheming. It wasn't just to get laid. It was really just to have a positive interaction. I was told that one was married, the other one was dating somebody seriously. No big deal. This is odds are what's going to happen. And I went back in, and my buddies were impressed, but like They said that they could never do that. But again, it's this fear, the fear of rejection wasn't there for me anymore because the sense of self had disappeared. This is also how I met my wife. I met her at a yoga class just due to the fact that I just approached her. So again, it's not about me. I'm just there trying to create a positive interaction. And if they don't want to be with me or they were dating someone, well, that's fine. I'm no longer at risk because I don't really have that big sense of self that needs constant coddling, that needs affirmation. Therefore, there is no fear. But if you look at it from somebody else's paradigm, they'd consider my actions to be positively courageous and something to be emulated. But the truth is, there was no courage in it at all. So when you see that wall of fear between you and your goal, whatever that might be, one just needs to ask whether the fears are justified and serves them, as in protecting our physical selves from, for example, getting into a fight with Chuck Liddell, or whether it's a manifestation of the ego, a perceived sense of self that feels threatened. If it's the latter, the first thing that we can do is just be aware that the fear is there and that the ego is being threatened. As we become aware of it, the ego lessens, it recedes. This is an Eckhart Tolle principle. There's a lot of truth in it. Another thing is when we realize what a small speck of dust that we as physical beings are on the face of the earth, and then you compare the vast earth to our solar system and the solar system to the galaxy, and life starts to look far less important. And this can be a freeing moment for us. Not that we're so unimportant, but it really doesn't matter. So be free and really enjoy the reality that we're living in. And as we are able to free ourselves from the apparition of the stone wall of fear that appears immediately in front of us when we're about to take action, we can then dispel that stone wall into the ether from which it came.
And remember this, kids, do not try this at home, all right?
Free yourself in your life. This station is Recharge Freedom, so sometimes I have this positive message that I hope is conveyed here. If you guys like it, by all means, thumb it up, share it with somebody, and if you're new to this channel, subscribe and hit that notification bell to make sure that you get future videos. Peace and blessings to everybody out there.